Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jeff. I got another story that I wanted to share today. This story was actually inspired by a recent conversation I had with my sister. My nieces are really finally at an age where they're old enough to be able to take extracurriculars. So one of the things that they wanted to do was see if they were interested in doing learning a secondary language. And this aspect of my life, right, it triggered a lot of conversations about my experience with learning English. And it's a little bit of a funny experience, but truly a very, I guess it has a moment in my opinion that really, if it didn't happen the way it did, I don't think I would have ended up becoming an engineer. And it had a major impact on my life very early on. And I figured that I just wanted to share this story. And one of the reasons why I want to share the story as well, there's a lesson here that I think I learned about finding mentorship, finding help, seeking advice, that I think I was really lucky to be able to have and to learn from at an earlier age. And at the end here, I'll share kind of the lessons and things I learned from this experience. Either way, I think this is overall just kind of a little bit of a funny story, and I want to hope you guys at least enjoy it. So, as I mentioned in some other videos, right, I grew up in lower income United States, predominantly large Latino neighborhood. My school was probably like 70% Latinos, and then a couple Asian people. Very, very diverse, which had a lot of its perks, but also had a lot of its negatives. I was in a program ever since I could remember, ever since I was a little kid, like really, really young, all the way up until about ninth grade. I was noted as a child that needed English and reading, writing, comprehension assistance. So I was in a program called English as a Second Language. I think most people in the US call this E.S.L. And so E.S.L is essentially that, exactly what it is, right? It's for mainly kids that are struggling with English, mainly for kids that, for one, probably recently immigrated here to the US and English is their second language. So they have to be able to learn English before they can have a better chance at succeeding in the everyday regular curriculums in the school systems. And so I was in exactly that. But the funny part about this, or not funny part, but the odd part about this is that I was one of the really, really rare and few students that I'm born here. I was born in the US. In fact, like even till this day, I've barely been out of the country. And as you can see, I don't have any sort of like accent, and English has always been my first language. But however, being from that environment, having parents that just work blue collar jobs their entire life, really hard, long day labor jobs, I personally did fall behind in my reading, writing skills. And even till this day, a lot of my friends make fun of me and they laugh at how poor my writing skills are, especially being an engineer now at this point and being able to make it past that point in my life. However, I personally, again, as I mentioned earlier, I personally don't think that I would have been able to get to become an engineer if I would have continued to progress through this program and never get this one opportunity or this 1 year that really like took stop. And someone was able to help me take a stop, take a hard pause, and re-look at the reason, some of the reasons why I was struggling with reading and writing and, the English in general. But just to kind of paint the picture a little bit more, right? I want to talk about what the experience was like growing up and being in these programs. So just like most kids in an American high school, middle school, and elementary school, you kind of like, you go to different classes, you have 5 classes a day. And so one of my classes was always E.S.L. I also had the regular reading, writing classes as well. But on top of that, instead of being able to take an extra elective, for example, like being able to do gym or that kind of thing, like doing a cooking class, I would have to take my E.S.L class. And the E.S.L class, as far as I can remember, was always like really off to the side and in a really small classroom that would only be like probably 20 kids, if that, maybe 15. And this class was incredibly challenging, right? Like it was challenging in the sense that there was a lot of social stigmas looking back as an adult, right? Like I recognized that as a kid, it was very embarrassing to join those classes. Like you guys ever seen those memes where they've everybody makes fun of the kid that has to read aloud in the class, right? But I like basically put it in a sense, right? I was that kid and I was in a classroom that had to do a class every single day where folks were like literally the only topic of the class was to be able to read aloud in front of other folks that also couldn't read very well. And so I remember just sliding in and out of these classes. Like I remember like taking the long way to get into the classes and just making sure that a lot of my friends and my friends and my classmates didn't see that I was in that curriculum. I think till this day, it's I think I brought it up a long time ago with one of my buddies, and they were like, "Oh, what you were doing that?" So a little bit of funny thing, and right again, a lot of what the classes was just reading aloud, and just this cycle of trying to get your English into a better state. In those classes, it was like predominantly folks, probably 95% folks that like probably can only speak a hint of English at the most. And so, and then, of course, there was me, like fully fluent in English, being able to speak. Definitely did have my struggles in reading and writing. But I think that was, in my opinion, I think that was more of a lack of just being in the environment, being in a lower income environment, and just lacking that educational skill rather than it literally being my second language, right? And so years went by, elementary school, middle school, like flew by, and I was like always in these classes. I think every now and then they would have a quiz or a test. And from what I know is that these tests were always ones that you could potentially test out of the program. And for myself, I think this is what my failure is, that I was never able to test out of these programs. Okay. Another funny part about these tests, right? It's like, it's not what you think. I clearly remember a very, very, really clear moment of this question that I got at that age. And the question it was a picture of a boy walking into a yellow school bus, like about to take the first step. And the question was, what is this student doing? And it was an A, B, and C multiple choice. And the solutions were like, A, this student is playing football. B, this student is eating. And then C, this student was, of course, getting onto the school bus. And so like that was like, I think that question was like the perfect explanation of the type of class that I was in for those things. And unfortunately for myself, as the years gone by, and even though I had additional assistance on learning English, being able to read English, read and write properly, I was never able to break the chain out of that class because, in my mind and looking back, it was just an entire blur of just going in there, being in that environment, reading out loud. I never felt like I had any like specialized help or nobody, I think I was just another face in that class. And so years kind of went by, and that's just kind of how I accepted my life growing up, was that I was just one of those kids that had to take these extra courses for reading. And as a young kid, I didn't understand it, right? Like I didn't understand the value of why I needed to get better, what the purpose of reading these books were that I had no interest in, just like any other kid at that age. And as years went by, as the regular curriculums got harder and harder, I felt like my English skills were just staying the exact same. My reading skills specifically were just stagnant at the exact same skill level. The pressure, and of course my own ego, being a young kid, not accepting where I was at and understanding, or at least having the right guidance, and just taking this thing over and over again. I just felt like it was getting harder and harder. And I think that this is kind of where the story, personally, in my opinion, switches, and where I got incredibly lucky to be able to have stumbled upon this teacher that really helped change the trajectory that I was headed. So the story takes a large turn, actually, when I was entering the 8th grade. And I had a teacher her name was Miss Ingstrom. And she was my E.S.L teacher along with my regular teacher. just so happened to be that way. It could have been anybody else, or a mix of a different ESL teacher versus a different regular English teacher. And for the first time ever, right, I spent many, many months in those classrooms struggling, usual, a lot of goofing around, a lot of struggling, not taking it seriously. And one thing that I didn't realize what was happening was that this teacher was actually, for the first time ever, really understanding my strengths and my weaknesses in my reading and writing skills. There was one summer where the summer leading into high school, she mentioned to my parents during parent conferences that I think I need a little bit more assistance. And that's what I ended up doing. She actually ended up, during the summertime where she was off from school, we would meet up for one-on-one extracurricular help every weekend. And the crazy part about this help wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And this is why I'm always extremely thankful for this defining moment for myself for this summer, is because I went in there, and it's not like she made me do anything differently. But what I realized why it was helpful is because this person, for once, had a tailored and specialized and spent enough time learning about what was my issue before just like blankly just like, here, you need extra tutoring. Let's just go read more books, right? And what I mean by this, one example is that she was the first person to ever be able to tell me that, hey, she thinks that I was, first of all, she told me, she's like, hey, I don't think you're dumb and that you can't learn how to read. One thing that I noticed from you is that something in your mind is blocking you, is like in your head, you're too quick to try to read through the pages, whereas you need to slow yourself down and read through each of the sentences and try to comprehend each of the words. And so the moment she said that to me, I realized that someone realized that one of my biggest struggles with reading is that as I'm reading the pages, as I'm reading the book, especially out loud, I'm fighting my own ego in that I have pride in the sense that I wanted to, like, I couldn't admit to myself that I was slower than the other students, or like I was racing against an arbitrary vision of what I thought a comprehensive reader, or how fast they would go. And so I was like reading really fast, but I wasn't comprehending. And so one tactic that she had me do was actually put my fingers on each and every single word and finish the word, glide through each of the word before moving on to the next word. And that in itself was a really big game changer and a really large shift in mindset that I had, and I personally am extremely thankful for, because I'm thankful that for the fact that someone actually was able to pay enough attention and be able to recognize what I personally needed instead of just giving me general advice, which has always happened in the last 10 years, right? It's like the last 10 years was always take a test. Here's where you stood. This is what we're going to hope for you to get to. And it was just very interesting being able to have someone mentor you and be able to see it one step deeper. And of course, that's all thanks to this teacher, Miss Ingstrom, being able to take that path and be able to show me and put in the time to be able to help me learn in that manner. I had a really big lesson here, right? The biggest lesson I learned from here is that not a lot of times in my life have I, even till this day, have I gotten tailored advice, right? Like a lot of folks ask me specifically, or, you, right? You get a lot of advice from folks day in and day out on how you should approach your life, how you should approach your career, dating, whatever it may be. But the lesson I learned here is that the best advice isn't from folks that are necessarily experienced. Sometimes the best experience is from somebody that has put in the effort to not give you advice, but to watch how you go about the thing you're trying to get advice from and learn about the things you need before giving that giving you advice on what you need. And I think that in today's day, I think we're missing those are a lot of the steps that we're missing, right? It's very easy to be able to, hear parents, hear your folks older than you preach and explain to you the things that you need. But I think one aspect that if you're struggling in a manner that I was with reading and whatever you're doing now is to seek out someone that's willing to not give you the advice right away, but can hear out your problem, spend the time to understand it, and then help you tweak and grow from there. And rather than kind of like a one sided dimension where you're the student and they're the teacher, right? They take a step back and they become the student of you before they try to be your teacher. And many times what I realize is that just like myself with reading, I wasn't dumb. I wasn't I wasn't someone that like had like a physical brain disability that caused me to not be able to read. It was a small tweak. It was an understanding of why I was doing what I was doing. And it was an alternative reasoning that was a little bit that was just needed an adjustment or another second look at how I was doing that thing. And I think that many times that's exactly what we need, especially like, for example, like being in your 20s, if you're chasing a career or if you're looking to make a change in your life. The changes in your life it's not as far. I guess what I'm trying to say is that they're not as far away as they think you are. They're not 1080, like 360 changes. They're small adjustments, and that small adjustments, minor tweaks on the way you're doing things and learning things and going about your day. But that's the hardest advice to get in anyone's life, right? You really need someone to be able to see it from the outside looking in, to be able to truly see that. And so yeah, it was just a great lesson, one that I'm really, really thankful for. And like like many of you guys, right? I've had many terrible teachers in my life, but luckily for me, I have had some good ones, and this one was one that really, like, I think I had a fork in the road, and like they just completely diverged me into the more positive path rather than the existing path. And they were finally able to help me take the next exit on the highway and get off the path that I was on. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if not, I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Later.